Yeah, think about this for a second. Have you ever been just so completely lost in a song that the world just vanished? Or maybe you stared into a flickering campfire, that steady rhythm pulling you into this quiet, almost ancient feeling, that experience, that absorption. It feels so deeply human, universally human, really. But what if those moments of being utterly swept away, weren't just random things? What if they're part of something, well, far, far older? What if hypnosis, in its most basic form, wasn't even our invention? Today, we're jumping into a really fascinating deep dive. We're looking at Vince DiTanna's Hypnosis and Extraterrestrials, an inquiry into alien influence on the human mind. Now, this isn't your standard science text or just another UFO report compilation. DiTanna does something different. He blends these speculative ideas with actual history, psychology, and those compelling, sometimes pretty unsettling UFO accounts. So our mission today is to explore this really provocative idea that hypnosis isn't a human innovation at all, that maybe it's a tool, possibly extraterrestrial in origin, that's been shaping our minds for, well, millennia.
We're going to pull out the most important nuggets from DiTanna's work and ask, what traces could this unseen influence have left in our history, our culture, maybe even in our dreams?
Exactly. And what's so radical about DiTanna's approach is that he's not just asking you to believe him outright. Instead, he's inviting us to re-examine things we take for granted, these really deep human experiences, from ancient rituals all the way to how we consume media today, but through this completely new lens. His core idea, really, is that what we think of as our evolutionary path, our cultural development, might actually be like a millennia-long program, one initiated by some kind of external intelligence, which naturally raises a huge question. What if those whispers in our minds, those gut feelings, aren't entirely our own?
Wow. That's a staggering thought, isn't it? That our consciousness itself could be influenced from outside. It immediately makes you ask, okay, what possible evidence could even begin to support a claim like that? DiTanna starts by taking us way back to the earliest human societies. Think about it before cities, before writing even. Humans were already mastering what he calls these technologies of consciousness. Picture it. Gathering around a fire at night, you've got the hypnotic flicker of the flames, the crackle of the wood, maybe an insistent drum beat, chanting, words going on and on. He argues these weren't just, ways to pass the evening, they were deliberate practices designed specifically to induce trance states. And what really jumps out looking at the research DiTanna brings together is how incredibly consistent these practices were across the globe. You have Siberian shamans drumming for hours, Amazonian tribes chanting until dawn. The basic structure, it's strikingly similar. Rhythmic sound, repetitive movements, kind of guided imagery or intention. And crucially, these were almost never solitary things. They were deeply social.
You get this synchronized group mind, very open to suggestion, often with a shaman or healer leading the way. Why do you think we see this remarkable consistency? Across cultures, separated by vast oceans and centuries.
Well, that consistency is precisely the bedrock of DiTanna's hypothesis. It's the how could this be question. He suggests, look, if some external intelligence wanted to influence early humanity, they wouldn't need, metal tools or advanced tech right away. They just need to teach the art of trance, teach it to a few key individuals, maybe, and those individuals would then transmit commands, information, worldviews through ritual. And a really compelling point he makes is that we might even see evidence encoded in ancient art. Think about cave paintings in Europe, petroglyphs in North America, carvings from Africa. They often show spirals, circles, geometric patterns right next to depictions of rituals or figures in trance. DiTanna asks, are these just decorations? Or could they be the earliest hypnotic manuals, instructions encoded visually, or maybe even records of the trance experience itself, those patterns you see behind closed eyes?
So not just early art, but maybe early instruction manuals from a user manual we didn't even know existed. That's wild. And, okay, as human societies got bigger, more complex, these trance practices didn't just fade away, right? They weren't pushed to the margins. DiTanna argues they were actually elevated, brought into temples, woven into complex rituals, placed right at the heart of authority. So where shamans once beat drums in caves, now you have priests leading elaborate ceremonies in, say, huge stone temples. The guiding voice wasn't just a local healer anymore. It became the voice of a god. You see examples everywhere. Think about Egyptian initiates undergoing days of purification, chanting in sacred sanctuaries, or the Greek priestesses at Delphi, the oracle, inhaling those vapors to deliver cryptic messages that literally shape the decisions of kings and states. Or Indian practitioners repeating Vedic hymns for hours and hours until their whole sense of self and time just dissolved. The core elements are still there. Narrow focus, softening critical thinking, introducing suggestion. The mechanism seems constant, just the setting got grander.
Exactly. And this is where DiTanna's concept of gods of suggestion really hits home. It's quite a chilling idea, actually. His insight is that these ancient rituals weren't necessarily just about spiritual connection. They were potentially these alien-engineered time-release suggestions, embedding commands, beliefs, social structures that would bind future generations for centuries, carried forward almost invisibly through what seems like harmless liturgy and tradition. A single commandment, maybe given in trance thousands of years ago, could echo down the centuries. Carried in the calendar, in sacred texts, unseen but incredibly binding. He also points to symbols things like staffs, crowns, serpents, watchful eyes. These weren't just symbols of power, they acted like visual anchors, hypnotic cues maybe, designed to trigger submission, awe, obedience. Once that association is embedded, just seeing a crown could evoke obedience, almost like how a specific word triggers a post-hypnotic suggestion in therapy today.
That's a really powerful framing. That the whole stagecraft of power, the symbols and rituals, might not just be human invention. Maybe it's a legacy. Techniques taught by someone or something that understood the mind's mechanics way before we did. So if these ancient power structures might echo extraterrestrial hypnotic techniques, then there's a much more direct, and frankly more chilling potential manifestation. It emerges in something distinctly modern. The whole missing time phenomenon in UFO lore, where memory itself seems to be the battleground. It's that classic, deeply unsettling story, right? A driver sees a strange light, next thing they know, it's hours later. Car might be miles down the road or parked neatly. The clocks jump forward. Something clearly happened. But the memory, just gone. A total blank. Reports like this really surged, didn't they, in the 1960s and 70s, though you can find earlier accounts too. What ties them together is that gaping hole in time. Minutes, sometimes hours, just unaccounted for, often followed by this feeling of confusion, disorientation, sometimes a profound sense of dread or violation.
And it's weird because even though the event itself is wiped from conscious memory, witnesses often describe physical traces later, burns, odd marks on their body, things like that.
Right. And to try and fill that void, pioneers in UFO research, people like Bud Hopkins, Dr. David Jacobs, they turned to hypnotic regression. They conducted hundreds, thousands of sessions over the years, trying to help these individuals, often called abductees, unlock what their conscious minds couldn't access. And these sessions very frequently uncovered detailed memories, encounters with non-human beings, medical-like examinations, telepathic communication, really complex stuff. But here's the paradox DiTanna highlights, and it is deeply unsettling. If hypnosis reveals these hidden memories, why are they hidden so effectively in the first place? His hypothesis is stark. Maybe the mind is deliberately placed into trance during the encounter itself, commanded to forget, then released with amnesia locked in place. In this view, hypnosis isn't just a tool for recovery. It was potentially the tool used for suppression initially, the lock itself. Therapeutic regression only becomes a partial key, maybe not always reliable.
Wow. Hypnosis as the lock. That's disturbing. And that leads straight into this other bizarre aspect, screen memories. Because it's not always just a blank space, is it? Sometimes people will recall something vivid, but something subtly wrong. We hear these accounts, owls with huge eyes staring from windows right when the missing time starts, deer standing unnaturally still by the roadside, sometimes just faceless figures lurking in shadows. These memories are, plausible enough for the waking mind to sort of accept them, but they're strange enough to persist, to nag at you, right at the edge of your awareness. And then, under deeper hypnotic regression, sometimes that image shifts. The owl's eyes suddenly become something else huge, black, totally unblinking, not an owl at all. It's like the mind grabs onto a cover story, but the subconscious knows there's something behind the screen.
Exactly. Now, from a conventional psychological standpoint, skeptics have a valid point. They argue quite rightly that hypnosis itself can create confabulation, basically false memories, though they feel completely real to the person, woven together from suggestion, maybe the hypnotist's expectation, or just cultural narratives about aliens. That's a critical factor to consider, absolutely. But DiTanna pushes further. What if the aliens are using hypnosis themselves during the encounter? Then the situation gets much darker. These false memories, these screen memories, might not be accidental side effects of therapy. They could be intentional camouflage, planted deliberately. And think about the implication. Memory is identity. To systematically remove or alter someone's memory, that removes evidence, it removes accountability, it fundamentally undermines choice and personal history. It suggests our personal narratives, maybe even our collective history, could be subtly or not so subtly rewritten. And yet, as the author notes, something often seems to push back. The explicit memory might be gone, but that emotional trace often remains, like a psychic bruise, a feeling that something happened. It's a kind of resistance, perhaps, from the mind itself.
That lingering feeling. Yeah, that emotional echo. It feels like your subconscious is trying to tell you something important. Pay attention. Something did happen here. So, Okay, if these ideas, ancient influence, manipulated memory, if they hold any water, the obvious next question is how? How could this influence actually work? DiTanna gets into the potential mechanics. He starts with something pretty fundamental, something every culture seems to have known instinctively, the power of sound, how sound moves the mind. A drum beat can quicken your heart, right? A steady chant can soften your resistance, make you feel connected to others. Modern neuroscience actually backs this up. It shows our brains produce electrical rhythms, beta waves when we're alert, alpha when relaxed, theta in that dreamy, trance-like state. And crucially, these brain rhythms can be influenced from outside. By steady sound at the right frequency, or even light flashing at a specific rhythm, our brains can sync up. So, DiTanna asks, if we can edge the brain towards trance with relatively simple tools like drums or flickering lights, imagine what a technologically advanced intelligence could achieve.
And he points to some fascinating, potentially supportive evidence embedded right in ancient architecture. These massive monuments, maybe they weren't just tombs or temples, maybe they were resonant chambers. Engineered, think about Newgrange in Ireland. That inner chamber literally hums, resonates when you sing low tones inside it. Or Chavin de Huantar in Peru. They found these ancient conch shell trumpets that produce these incredibly complex, swirling sounds designed to echo through intricate stone corridors. Imagine experiencing that. And maybe the most famous example, the Hypogame of Malta. This underground complex. A male voice speaking or chanting in a specific part of it resonates powerfully right around 111 hertz. Modern studies have actually linked that specific frequency to altered states of consciousness. Even reduced activity in the brain's language centers makes it harder to think critically, perhaps easier to accept suggestion. So were these acoustic effects just, accidents of architecture, or were they the result of incredibly careful design by an intelligence that really understood human neurology and acoustics?
Right. Acoustics is a technology of consciousness. And it's not just sound, is it? It talks about vibration, too. Vibrations through the body, like from a shaman's rattle held close. And flickering light. You mentioned firelight earlier. It often flickers around 8 to 12 cycles per second. That happens to match the brain's alpha rhythm perfectly. The rhythm associated with relaxation, meditation, heightened suggestibility. Is that just a coincidence? Or did someone know this? And then you have myths from all over the world linking music directly to divine or supernatural power. Orpheus charming beasts and stones, Krishna's flute, mesmerizing everyone, those biblical walls of Jericho supposedly falling to trumpet blasts. DiTanna speculates that maybe beneath these epic stories lie folk memories. Memories of actual techniques, using frequency and vibration to influence minds. Techniques perhaps not entirely human in origin.
It's compelling. And then there's another layer, the symbols. DiTanna discusses the persistence of specific hypnotic symbols in myth and art, things that recur across cultures and millennia. Spirals, eyes, serpents, mirrors. He argues these aren't just random decorative motifs. They might have inherent hypnotic functions. A spiral, for instance, naturally draws your focus inward, right? Like the classic spinning spiral a stage hypnotist might use. It narrows attention. The watching eye, think the Eye of Horus in Egypt, or even the Eye of Providence on the dollar bill, it establishes this sense of being watched. Dominance maybe triggers submission. Serpents, with their fluid, mesmerizing movement, could embody the trance state itself, that feeling of flowing consciousness. And mirrors, they often symbolize a threshold, don't they? A place where reality seems to bend or reflect differently, a gateway to altered perception. His hypothesis is if these symbols were intentionally seeded, maybe by extraterrestrials, then ancient art wasn't just decoration, it was instruction, a visual manual for how to manipulate attention, maybe even a form of subliminal communication passed down through generations.
Whoa. Art as an instruction manual for the mind. That is genuinely mind-bending. Okay, so we have sound, vibration, symbols. What about the ultimate altered state? Dreams. DiTanna points out that sleep, that dreaming state, has always been seen as this liminal space, that weird in-between zone where the rules of reality bend, where impossible things feel completely normal, unquestioned. So if hypnosis is indeed some kind of alien inheritance, dreams seem like the most natural territory for its use. Why? Because during REM sleep, our rapid eye movement sleep, the brain is incredibly active, highly suggestible, very similar neurochemically to a hypnotic state. And you see this focus on dreams throughout history, don't you? Mesopotamian priests had elaborate dream interpretation books. Egyptian gods were believed to send instructions through dreams. The Greeks had dream incubation rituals at the temples of Asclepius, seeking healing or guidance through sleep. These weren't just passive beliefs. They were active systems designed to channel, interpret, and maybe even induce certain dream experiences. Could these ancient frameworks have been originally passed down by beings who really understood the mechanics of subconscious suggestion during sleep?
It certainly connects very directly to those modern abductee accounts, which often describe the experience as feeling intensely dreamlike. You get reports of paralysis, feeling a strange presence in the room, reality feeling blurred or fluid things, very similar to known sleep phenomena like sleep paralysis. Now, skeptics reasonably attribute these to sleep paralysis or hypnagogic hallucinations, natural brain events. But many experiencers insist these felt different, both dreamlike and somehow intensely physically real, more real than a typical dream. So DiTanna posits, if aliens do use hypnosis, dreams offer the perfect cover story. It's an arena where memories could potentially be altered, suggestions implanted, without leaving obvious physical evidence. The person might just dismiss it as a weird dream later. He even touches on lucid dreaming, where the dreamer becomes aware they're dreaming and can sometimes exert control. He sees this as maybe a clue. If humans can gain awareness within a dream, imagine how a more advanced intelligence could potentially interact with or even insert entire scenarios, entire scripts into someone's dream state. We know external sounds or sensations can sometimes be woven into our dreams. What if thoughts or commands could be too?
Yeah, absolutely. The idea that our dreams aren't just random neurological noise, but maybe a potential canvas for intentional suggestion.
Yeah.
That's profound. And it feels like the echoes of all these potential ancient techniques, the repetition, the symbols, the altered states, they're not just ancient history. They're absolutely all around us today. The ancient temples might be ruins, sure, but DiTanna argues the underlying structure of suggestion is alive and well, thriving even in our modern world. Think about advertising. It's built on repetition, rhythm, emotional association, those jingles that get stuck in your head. Just do it. I'm loving it. Pure hypnotic suggestion, in a way. Political speeches often rely on short, powerful phrases repeated like mantras. Yes, we can. Make America great again. The rhythm, the repetition often seems to matter more than the complex policy details, doesn't it? What about film and television? Talk about inducing a voluntary trance. The lights go down, your attention narrows to the screen, and for 2 hours you willingly suspend disbelief. You accept impossible events as momentarily real. The story delivers not just entertainment, but also values, archetypes, powerful emotional cues, and lessons. And then there's social media, that endless scroll. The algorithm's feeding you exactly what keeps you hooked. It's like a personalized hypnotist, constantly reinforcing your identity, your desires, your anxieties. It's a trance state that's personalized, often invisible, for many people almost constant. It really makes you wonder, if this is suggestion perfected, turned into entertainment, what does that do to our ability to think freely?
That's a key point DiTanna makes. The most striking thing about modern suggestion is how voluntary it often is. People eagerly line up for blockbuster movies. They hum advertising jingles without thinking. They scroll through feeds for hours on end. It's almost as if, he suggests, this is the program reaching its peak efficiency. When suggestion becomes entertainment, resistance just melts away. We're not just passively accepting hypnotic influence. In many ways, we're actively seeking it out, demanding it. Now, if aliens have used hypnosis or similar techniques to influence humanity over millennia, it shouldn't really surprise us that human institutions, once they grasp its power, would try to copy the method, or at least try to understand it.
And they definitely tried. We know they did. You just have to look at something like M-Culture. Remember that. The CIA's huge, sprawling, and deeply controversial project back in the 1950s and 60s. Their goal was chillingly straightforward. Find ways to control thought and behavior. Total control, ideally. They experimented with hypnosis, yes, but also sensory deprivation. Potent drugs like LSD, electroshock therapy, often on completely unwitting subjects. Soldiers, prisoners, psychiatric patients, people who had no idea they were being experimented on. The Cold War provided the justification, of course, fear that the Soviets were ahead. But the underlying drive seems to have been this hunger for a key, a way to unlock the human mind, to bypass will and choice.
But despite throwing enormous resources and ethical considerations out the window, the results of M-Culture were apparently pretty inconsistent, often failures, actually. It seemed human operators just couldn't reliably produce that total, predictable control they were after. Subjects resisted, even unconsciously. Memory sometimes returned unexpectedly. Basic morality often proved difficult to override completely. DiTanna offers a speculative interpretation here. He suggests maybe these scientists were like cavemen trying to figure out a smartphone. They were groping towards something they only dimly understood. Seeing perhaps a shadow of techniques far more advanced, far more subtle than their own crude methods. And here's that speculative leap again. If aliens had already mastered hypnosis as a tool of influence, maybe human governments were essentially trying to reverse engineer alien technology. But the technology wasn't hardware, it was mind control techniques, a power potentially greater than any spaceship or weapon. And this, of course, brings us crashing into the ethics of it all, the profound responsibility. And experiments like M-Cultura were performed without consent, causing immense trauma, shattering lives, utterly unethical by any standard. So DiTanna forces us to confront an even bigger moral question. If extraterrestrials did seed these powerful mind-influencing techniques into human culture, what does that mean? Are we essentially victims of millennia-long programming? Or maybe students of a teacher who simply never cared about consent, who saw us perhaps as just subjects? It really highlights how the capacity to influence carries this immense ethical weight, whether that influence comes from human hands or potentially non-human ones.
That is a deeply profound ethical minefield, isn't it? Because if any of this is remotely true, then we have to seriously consider this idea DiTanna calls post-hypnotic humanity, the idea that humanity as a whole might be carrying around commands, instructions planted long, long ago, just waiting dormant, waiting to be activated by the right trigger, a specific ritual, a symbol, a story, a sound. Think about how much of our lives are shaped by things we don't consciously choose. Our calendars dictate cycles of feasting and mourning. National flags evoke instant, powerful emotions. Anthems stir collective sentiment almost automatically. DiTanna suggests these deep cultural structures could function like massive societal-level post-hypnotic triggers, shaping behavior on a vast scale, often without us even realizing we're responding to an old command.
Which leads directly to his concept of the trigger, capital T, the trigger. If hypnosis can plant dormant instructions, then what could activate them on a mass scale? A global signal, a specific broadcast, a unique frequency pattern, or maybe just a predicted confluence of events. Think about the sheer number of prophecies across cultures about great awakenings or world-ending battles, or the return of gods or saviors, Ragnarok, Revelation, the return of Quetzalcoatl in Mesoamerica. These are powerful narratives, but DiTanna offers another possibility. What if they aren't just myths or prophecies? What if they are, in fact, scripts, instructions encoded in our deepest stories, designed to activate mass behavior when certain predetermined signs appear in the world? The implication is truly staggering. Humanity might not be fully in the driver's seat of its own destiny. We might be more like passengers carrying sealed orders, awaiting the next instruction, all the while believing our reactions, our choices, are entirely our own.
Wow. Passengers awaiting the next instruction, believing our choices are our own. That's an incredible thought to grapple with, that our collective history might not be entirely self-directed. So, okay, bringing this all together, if hypnosis, this powerful tool, is truly woven deep into the human story, but maybe not as our invention, but as something else, what on earth does that mean for our future? Where do we go from here?
Well, DiTanna suggests that the whole issue of hypnosis, its power and its ethics, really holds up a mirror to humanity itself. In how we study it, use it, or misuse it, we can see both our incredible capacity for healing and compassion, and also our deep-seated hunger for control over ourselves and others. If aliens did somehow plant this tool among us, perhaps they're observing, watching to see how we handle this double-edged sword. But here's the hopeful note, potentially, in his perspective. Awareness changes the game. Awareness is the counterspell. Just knowing that a thought or an impulse might not be entirely your own, that it could be a suggestion that knowledge itself begins to restore choice. The first line of defense against the trigger, whatever it might be, is simply knowing that such a thing might exist. Being vigilant. He suggests we can actually become hypnotists of ourselves, using practices like self-hypnosis, meditation, mindfulness techniques that help us understand and master our own states of consciousness, thereby reducing our vulnerability to unwanted outside influence.
Becoming hypnotists of ourselves. I like that. Taking back control. So what does all this mean for you listening right now as you navigate this world absolutely brimming with suggestion, from ancient patterns to modern media? DiTanna's challenging work suggests that if some external intelligence gave us this powerful tool, maybe inadvertently or intentionally, they also left us with the capacity, the potential to master it. The question just hangs there, doesn't it? Waiting, almost like a suggestion itself right at the edge of your thoughts. Will humanity wake up? Will we collectively break the trance, understand these mechanisms, and start using hypnosis consciously, ethically, for healing, creativity, expanding freedom? Or will we remain subjects, entertained, maybe pacified, maybe guided by endless repetition, by forces we don't perceive? The whispers in our minds, whatever their source, they'll likely remain. But how we choose to answer them, that hopefully is still up to us.